Glyndebourne's 2022 season opens with an exciting premiere. Not only is this Glyndebourne's first ever staging of Ethel Smythe's 1906 opera The Wreckers, but it's also the first major professional staging since 1939 of a piece pivotal to the history of English opera, a work championed by Gustav Mahler and Thomas Beecham, who considered this powerful, evocative tragedy a masterpiece. I'm Alexandra Coghlan, Glyndebourne's opera content specialist, and I'm here by the Glyndebourne Lake, a rather more tranquil scene than Smythe's dramatic Cornish seascapes. With its sweeping musical geography, passionate central love story, and unflinching portrait of fear, groupthink, hypocrisy and mob mentality, The Wreckers is a work that still feels topical, testimony not only to the musical ambition and bravery, but also the defiant, unorthodox values of its composer. In a remote corner of Cornwall, a God-fearing community live a desperate, precarious existence. Their only hope? The ships that are regularly wrecked on their rocks. But when they start to cause those shipwrecks deliberately, using ancient salvage rights to justify murdering the crew for profit, it tears the villagers apart, setting in motion a tragedy that, ultimately, kills two of their own. One of the highlights of a prolific and successful career that established the composer as a significant voice not only in England, but across Europe, The Wreckers was Smythe's third opera and received major stagings during the composer's lifetime, in Leipzig and both London's Sadler's Wells and Covent Garden, where it was the first opera by a female composer ever to be staged. Nowhere are Smythe's cosmopolitan musical tastes and influences more evident than in an opera whose cinematic orchestral writing owes much to Wagner and Strauss, while its melodies, and particularly Avis's sensual music, looks to France and the works of Bizet and Massenet. But the subject matter, life on the Cornish coast with its stormy seas and dramatic cliffs, is pure England, and this portrait of a remote coastal community has long been seen as a direct precursor and the missing link to Benjamin Britten's Peter Grimes.
I knew, as many of us knew about The Wreckers, because we'd read about it in books. I went to see it on its centenary year, which is 2006. Duchy Opera put it on. David Sulkin directed it down in Cornwall, which was quite exciting. So I went down and saw that excellent production. So from that moment on, I've been looking to trying to find the right moment and the right place to give this piece a chance to re-establish itself as a major British opera.
Yeah, and then you came to me and said, what about it? I didn't know it. Had a look at a kind of a vocal score in tatters in bits, and then found a mini recording of excerpts from a prom, and thought, wow, if we really excavate and we go right back to the beginning and we see what this composer really wanted, then this could be an extraordinary venture.
So you've mentioned this idea of going back to the original opera. So you're staging it in a version that's never been seen before in French. Why this version?
In the version I saw in Cornwall, Amanda Holder had written a rather clever new English version, but I didn't want to do a new version, a translation of the English into English, if you see what I mean. And I knew it had been premiered in German, but that it had been written in French. So we went burrowing around to see what we could find. And Martin Bennett, the librarian, who is actually the patron saint of this production, in the amount of work and research he's been doing.
Wizard down in the vaults trying to find everything about it.
Extraordinary. Anyway, he found the French piano score, and we had a look through that. And
brilliant day when Matt Fletcher, the pianist here, Stephen, myself and Melly sat down, listened, we all sang and thought, well, this is the original, this is where we want to be, the vocal lines, the French. There's something about, we want to get as close to her original her original inspiration for this piece.
It's funny that you mentioned that you were all discovering it around the piano, because of course that's how Ethel Smythe introduced it to her backers, to her audience, isn't it? You know, sitting there, singing all of the parts herself, playing all the notes.
And it had this excitement, and it had this sense of, and all the conversations about, oh God, but this bit actually isn't scored yet. This bit's only in English, but God, we love. Melly is saying, but this bit of drama is essential for where we go. Can we find the notes for that? Phone call to Martin, and then the whole thing has this energy, and it's wonderful. It's got a huge energy where everyone's bringing things.
So I think The Wreckers is a piece we've all heard of, but not many of us have actually heard it. So is the music any good?
I think the thing that struck me, which made me originally go, we have to do this, is that it's brilliant. And I think if you bring a sort of X-ray eye to it, massive brass section, harps glittering, it's got all the colour of fantasy and seashore, and at its core is a fantastical work that needs giving it's sort of a real platform, I'd say.
The Wreckers is a major milestone on Glyndebourne's journey towards creating sustainable opera. Everything, from props and costumes to lighting and design, will be made with a view to achieving that goal. The Wreckers reunites the creative team behind Glyndebourne's much-loved Rusalka. Conductor Robin Ticciati and director Melly Still take their inspiration from the opera's original Cornish setting in all its wild, elemental beauty.
I've read Ethel Smythe's memoirs, which are extraordinary. She talks at length about the process of working with Henry Brewster, the librettist, who was her dear, dear friend and lover, about the development of the piece. They were really interested in trying to convey the experience of a very isolated community. They were thinking less, so for them it was very much the community that they write about in The Wreckers is really a symbol of an isolated Britain. And they're very specific about this. And that's because as she was bisexual and as lovers he was married, they were trying to manage their worlds at the start of the 20th century in a society, of course, that was frowning upon everything they did. And so they felt that there was something quite insular about Britain at the time. So that, for me, that felt quite pertinent. And I wanted to explore that further and really honour their way in as well. And looking at why that community might be starving now and what the struggles might be, because as you know, that they resort to wrecking ships because they're starving and they're very isolated and they're a community that are cut off and so on. We started to look at that particular world in a heightened fictionalized way. How would it be today? What would their lives be like? Why would they be like that? And we looked at a community with very few resources. And I was discussing the Green Book, which is now being used by a lot of companies who are very keen to work sustainably. And it meant that I was committing myself to thinking, not only asking my technical team to think sustainably, but actually using it as an engine for the aesthetics and for the design. And it's sort of tied in with how this community were having very few resources or reusing it, everything that they found, whether it was the salvaging of the ship, whether it was the rubbish that came up onto the beach and so on. So we're actually committing to do that in terms of going down with our big trucks to the beaches around here a few times between now and when we open next year, to see what is on the beaches, and we're using that as much as possible in the design. They are utterly dependent. It's the engine of the story, is that dependency on what gets washed up.
A powerful psychological drama, closer to Italian verismo than its Victorian contemporaries, The Wreckers explodes every cliché of English music. With its stirring score, rich choruses and colourful orchestral writing, it's ready once again to claim its place as a too long neglected 20th century masterpiece.